Open your hand, palm up, resting on your knee. Leave it there. Notice that nothing about that is comfortable. A hand that's open can't hold anything. It also can't stop anything from being taken. 2,000 years ago, a teacher put one line into a prayer that most of you already know by heart. And the word he used for bread in that line does not appear anywhere else in the Greek language. Not in a letter, not in a receipt, not in a poem, nowhere. Someone made that word up, and no one has ever been certain what it means. Keep your hand open while I tell you the rest. The prayer is the one you learned before you understood it. Our Father, thy kingdom come. And then, in the middle, a line so ordinary that it slides past the ear every single time. Give us this day our daily bread. 11 syllables. You have probably said them 1,000 times. And the word sitting at the center of them, the word we translate as daily, is a word that scholars have argued about for 18 centuries without resolution. Origen, who wrote in Greek, who thought in Greek, who was one of the most careful readers of Greek the ancient world produced, looked at that word around the year 230 and said plainly that he had never seen it. Not in common speech. Not in philosophy. He suspected one of the gospel writers had simply invented it, because no existing word would do. Sit with that for a moment. At the exact point where this prayer turns from heaven to your kitchen table, from kingdom and will to the thing you actually need this week, the language runs out. Something was being asked for that Greek did not have a word for. Your hand is still open. Notice how quickly you want to close it. That impulse is the whole subject of the next half hour. Here is what I'm going to do, and here's what I am not going to do. I'm not going to tell you this prayer produces money. I want that said early, plainly, and without softening, because there is an entire industry built on the opposite claim, and every part of it is selling something. If you came here for a formula, say these words. Receive this sum, you should leave now, with my respect. That video exists. This isn't one. What I am going to do is take that one line apart, where it came from, what it meant to people who had no savings and no safety net, and ate what they earned that same evening, why the translators fought over it. What happens in your body when you say it at its natural speed instead of racing through it? And what changes in your judgment when you ask for something from a settled nervous system instead of a panicked one? The change I'm describing is smaller than a miracle and harder to notice. It is also, unlike a miracle, measurable. And I'll tell you exactly where the measurements stop and the interpretation begins, because a good part of what follows is interpretation, and you deserve to know which is which. You don't have to believe any of this. That matters more than it sounds. There is no faith requirement here, no doctrine you have to sign. If you are certain the whole thing is myth, you can still do everything I'm about to describe, exactly as described, and the physiological part will happen to you anyway. Your lungs don't check your theology. So keep your doubt. Bring it with you. This is not a new prayer. It's the one you already know, said with the bracing taken out. The line has been read 3 very different ways, by 3 groups of people who are not confused and who each had good reasons. They contradict each other. That contradiction is the most useful thing in this entire video, and I'll come back to it. Start with the plainest reading. The first tradition, bread is bread and bread is wages. Picture the man this prayer was first spoken to. He owns no land, he has no contract. Every morning he walks to the marketplace and stands there, and he waits to see whether anyone hires him. If someone does, he works until dark and receives 1 coin. A denarius. That coin buys the food his household eats that night. If nobody hires him, his family eats less. This is not a metaphor, and it was not rare. It was the ordinary economic condition of most of the people standing in that crowd, and the law they lived under knew it. The Torah forbids holding a day laborer's wage overnight pay him before sunset, because he is poor and he is counting on it. That instruction is in Deuteronomy, and it exists precisely because a single delayed payment meant a night without dinner. So when the line says, "Give us this day our daily bread," the first audience did not hear poetry. They heard, "Let there be work tomorrow." They heard, "Let the coin come before dark." Bread was the unit of survival, and survival was priced by the day. Which means the very first thing this line ever meant was money, not money as wealth, but money as the distance between today and tomorrow. That's tradition 1, concrete, economic, urgent. The second tradition, the word won't hold still. Now go to the people who had to write it down. The Gospels were composed in Greek, Koine Greek, the common trade language of the Eastern Mediterranean. That is the settled scholarly position, and it isn't seriously disputed. But the man speaking almost certainly wasn't speaking Greek. The consensus there is just as strong. Jesus taught in Aramaic, the everyday language of first-century Judea and Galilee. So there is a seam, a real one. Something was said in one language and preserved in another, and the seam runs directly through this line. Which brings us to that invented word, epiasios. Break it apart and it can go two directions at once. It can mean the bread for the coming day, the portion that gets you to tomorrow, or it can mean the bread that is above substance, beyond the ordinary, super essential. Those are not shades of the same idea. Those are two different requests. And the man who gave the Western world its Bible could not choose between them. Jerome, translating into Latin, rendered that single word two different ways in two different Gospels, the everyday bread in one, the supersubstantial bread in the other. Same word, same prayer. Two answers, in the same translator's own work. There was, for a while, one possible citing of the word outside Scripture, reportedly on an ancient household shopping list, which would have settled it in favor of the plain, grocery meaning. The papyrus was subsequently lost, and the reading is now widely doubted. So the evidence that would have closed the question went missing. That's tradition 2. Textual, unresolved, honest about being unresolved. The third tradition, the language underneath. And then there are the readers who go back through the Greek, toward the Aramaic, the Syriac liturgies, the mystical schools, the interpreters who work from the Peshitta and from the Old Semitic practice of reading a text at several levels at once. In that reading, the word underneath bread is lakma. And they will tell you that lakma opens outward, that the phrase is closer to the bread of our need, not just food, but whatever the specific hunger of this specific day requires. And some in that tradition go further and connect bread to wisdom, to understanding, arguing that in the older Semitic ear, the two ideas were audible in one another. Now, I have to be straight with you about that last one, because it's beautiful, and it's everywhere, and it is not solid. That bread and wisdom connection comes out of interpretive tradition, midrash, mystical commentary, devotional translation, not out of mainstream historical linguistics. The scholars who work on Aramaic professionally do not generally endorse it. If you have seen it quoted with great confidence on the internet, the confidence was added later. I'm not telling you that to take it away from you. I'm telling you because the weaker version of that claim is doing damage to the stronger one underneath it. Here is the stronger one. Strip out the etymology you can't defend, and something survives that you don't need any linguistics for at all. This prayer asks for a portion, not a store. It asks for today, not for security. Every version, in every tradition, in every disputed translation, agrees on that. The plain reading, the textual reading, and the mystical reading all fight over what bread means, and every single one of them keeps the word this day, which is the point I promised to come back to. Look at what just happened. 3 traditions, reading the same 11 syllables, arrived at 3 different destinations. If this line were a fixed instruction, a lever, a mechanism, a code with one output, they would not differ. Mechanisms don't produce 3 readings. Languages do. The disagreement isn't a flaw in the evidence. It's the shape of the evidence. You're not looking at a machine that dispenses provision. You're looking at a sentence that has been carrying something for 2,000 years that no single language could hold on its own, which is why every language that touched it had to reach for a different word. There's a 4th thread, and it's the oldest one, and nobody wrote it down because nobody had to. Your hand. Watch what a person does when they ask for something they genuinely need. Not a favor, a need. The hand turns over. The palm comes up. It happens in every culture on earth. In people who share no language, no scripture, no history of contact. It happens in infants before they have words for anything. And watch the opposite. Watch someone bracing against loss. The hand closes. The fingers curl in. The shoulders come up half an inch. That happens everywhere too. Nobody taught you either gesture. They sit below the level of belief, in the part of you that was running long before you had opinions about God. The open palm is the posture of receiving. The closed fist is the posture of holding. And the two are physically incompatible. That is not a metaphor I'm imposing. It's the mechanics of a hand. You cannot receive and grip at the same time. The same muscles that do one cannot do the other. Now here is the uncomfortable part. Think about how you have actually prayed, or hoped, or wished, during the hardest month you've had recently. Were your hands open? Most people, asked honestly, find they were asking with the fist. Asking while braced. Asking the way you ask when you already expect the answer to be no, and you're trying to get the disappointment in early so it lands softer. That's not a spiritual failure. It's a nervous system doing exactly what a nervous system does under threat. But it does mean that a great many people have spent years saying a receiving prayer in a gripping posture. and the body was never confused about which one it was doing. So how does a line like this go quiet inside a prayer that billions of people still say? The easy answer is that someone took it, that it was hidden, or suppressed, or sanded down deliberately by institutions who didn't want you asking for anything concrete. I don't believe that, and I'm not going to sell it to you. Shadowy villains make satisfying videos and bad explanations. What happened is duller and worse. It didn't die. It starved. Here's how starvation works with a sentence. You learn it as a child, before you can parse it. You say it in a room, with other people saying it, at their speed, which is the speed of a group that wants to be finished. You say it at funerals when you're too shocked to hear it, and at weddings when you're watching someone else. You say it in about 30 seconds. 30 seconds for 60-odd words. Do that arithmetic, and you get a pace closer to reading a terms of service agreement than to asking for anything. At that speed, the breadline takes under 2 seconds. 2 seconds is not enough time for a sentence to reach the part of you that's actually worried about money. It's barely enough time to pronounce it. And a sentence that is never given a pause has no way to land, not because it's weak, but because landing takes room, and no room was ever left. That's the starvation. Not suppression, compression. And compression is invisible, which is why nobody noticed. Nothing was removed. Every word is still there, in the same order, in every translation. You could say the prayer perfectly, every day, for 40 years, and never once give that line the 2 seconds of silence. It needs to become a question you're actually asking. The fist tightened over 4 decades, one recitation at a time, and no one ever felt it close. That's also the good news, and it's a specific kind of good news. Nothing has to be recovered. Nothing was lost. There is no secret text, no suppressed manuscript, no lineage you have to be initiated into. The line is intact. It's just been said too fast. Now, I want to hand you the part that isn't interpretation, because everything up to here has been history and reading, and you have every right to be skeptical of both. This next part was measured, in a hospital, by cardiologists who were not interested in anyone's spiritual life. The setup was simple. Take a group of healthy adults. Have them recite prayer out loud, the Ave Maria, in Latin, in the rhythm of the Rosary. Have them recite a yoga mantra. And in between, watch what their bodies do. What they found was not subtle. Both the prayer and the mantra pulled the breath down to almost exactly 6 breaths a minute. Not approximately, almost exactly. 2 very different traditions, developed on opposite ends of the world with no contact between them, and both had independently landed on the same respiratory rate. And at that rate, something specific happens. 6 breaths a minute is roughly where your heart rhythm and your breathing rhythm synchronize. The heart already speeds slightly on the in-breath and slows on the out-breath that's ordinary. But slow the breath to around 6 per minute, and those 2 oscillations line up and reinforce each other, and heart rate variability climbs. In that study, the reflex that governs your blood pressure sharpened measurably while people were reciting. Nobody in that room was praying in order to lower their blood pressure. The effect didn't care. Now, the honest edges of this, stated plainly rather than announced. That particular study was small 23 people. The exact resonant rate isn't universal. It varies person to person, somewhere in the range of 4.5 to 7 breaths a minute, and follow-up work has found that an individual's own rate isn't perfectly stable even from one session to the next. And an improved barrel reflex measured over a few minutes in a lab is not the same claim as a health outcome over a lifetime. I'm not making that second claim. What survives all of those caveats is still remarkable. And it's the thing I want you to take. The pace of liturgical prayer is not arbitrary. Traditions that never met each other, working with no instruments and no physiology, converged on a speaking rhythm that happens to sit right on top of the body's own resonant frequency. They could not have known why it worked. They kept it because it worked. And then we sped it up. That's the mechanism, and notice what it does to the story I've been telling you. The bracing isn't only psychological, it's respiratory. A fast, shallow, 30-second recitation keeps you in exactly the breathing pattern that a threatened animal uses. A slow one moves you out of it, not by persuading you, not by convincing you of anything, but by changing the rate at which air enters your chest. Which means the prayer, set at its own speed, is doing something to you before you have agreed to anything. This is not a new prayer. It's the one you already know, and the bracing comes out through your lungs, whether or not you believe a word of it. If you are a skeptic, this is your entry point. You don't need to accept a single theological claim to accept that 6 breaths a minute does something reproducible to a human autonomic nervous system. Take that much. Leave the rest. It's enough to run the experiment. So here is the practice. 3 stages. They have to be done in order, and I'll explain why each one requires the one before it. Before that, one piece of history, because it tells you this isn't my invention. The oldest surviving Christian instruction manual outside the New Testament, a short document called the Didache, written somewhere around the end of the 1st century, within living memory of the events, gives its readers a direction about this exact prayer. Say it 3 times a day, not once at church. 3 times, every day, in your own life. That instruction is 1900 years old, and almost nobody follows it anymore. What I'm going to ask of you is less than that. Twice. Stage 1. Slow it until you run out of breath. Say the whole prayer out loud, alone, at a pace where you have to take a breath in the middle of a line. That's the entire test. If you get through it without needing air, you're still going too fast. Most people's first attempt takes about 30 seconds. You're aiming for something closer to a minute and a half. It will feel absurd, like you're performing. Push through that, because the awkwardness is information. It's telling you how much of your relationship with this prayer has been velocity. You don't need to count breaths. You don't need an app. The rhythm finds itself when you stop hurrying it. That's the whole finding from the last section. Your job is only to stop hurrying. Do stage 1 for 2 days before you add anything. Stage 2. Stop at the bread line and open your hand. Now the anchor comes back the same gesture you made at the beginning of this, except this time you know what it is. Say the prayer slowly, and when you reach, "Give us this day our daily bread," stop. Not a pause for effect. A real stop. 2 seconds, 3, however long it takes for the sentence to arrive somewhere. And in that stop, turn your hand over, palm up, open. That's it. That's the whole ritual. Now why this can't come first? If you tried to insert a 3-second silence into a 30-second recitation, there is no silence to insert it into. The prayer is moving too fast to have a gap in it. Stage 1 isn't a warm-up. It's what creates the physical room that stage 2 occupies. You have to make the space before you can put anything in it. And the gesture is not decoration. It's the only part of this that your body cannot lie about. You can say the words while braced. You can even feel sincere while braced. But you cannot hold an open palm and a clenched fist at the same time. And while your hand is open, the posture of gripping is physically unavailable to you. That's why it's a hand and not a thought. Thoughts negotiate. Hands don't. Stage 3. Ask in the tense of something already given. This is the last stage, and it's the one that does the actual work. And it's impossible without the first 2. With your hand open, on that line, don't ask the way you ask a creditor. Ask the way you'd say thank you for something that already arrived. Not pretending. Not lying to yourself about your balance. Something more specific. Notice that you are, in fact, currently fed. That there was bread today. That the day you are asking about has, so far, held. Gratitude first. Then the request. From inside the gratitude. The reason this requires stage 2 is simple and physical. Try to generate genuine gratitude with your fist clenched and your shoulders up. You'll find you can produce the idea of it, but not the feeling. The open hand isn't a symbol of receptivity, it's a precondition for it. When to do it. 2 windows, and the placement isn't arbitrary. The last 2 minutes before sleep, and the first 2 minutes after waking, before you touch your phone. The evening one matters because of what your mind does in the gap between lying down and losing consciousness. That gap is not neutral. In a study of 400 people, more grateful individuals slept measurably better, and the researchers traced the effect specifically to what people were thinking as they fell asleep. Grateful people entered sleep with fewer worrying thoughts and more positive ones. And that difference, not gratitude in the abstract, was what predicted the sleep. You are going to think something in those 2 minutes regardless. This is a decision about what. The morning one matters because the first input of the day sets the frame the rest of the day arrives into. Your phone is designed by people who understand that better than you do. Get there first. 7 days. Then stop and assess. Not 30. Not forever. 7. And the stop threshold, which I want you to take seriously. If at any point this stops being a practice and becomes a compulsion, if you find yourself thinking that skipping it will cause something bad to happen, if a missed morning produces dread, if you start repeating it to ward something off, stop immediately. That is not what this is. And continuing it in that state will make things worse, not better. The mark of the practice working is that missing a day is unremarkable. Let me tell you what the 7 days will actually be like. Because if you're expecting the wrong thing, you'll quit on day 3. Nothing will happen on day 1. Almost certainly nothing on day 2 either. What will happen is restlessness. You'll get through 4 lines and notice your mind has gone to a message you need to send. You'll feel foolish saying words out loud in an empty room. You'll speed up without deciding to catch yourself, slow down, and speed up again. Here's how to read that. The restlessness isn't a sign you're bad at this. It's a measurement. It's showing you the size of the gap between the pace you're attempting and the pace you've been living at. A mind that can't sit still for 90 seconds isn't a defective mind, it's an unpracticed one, and the fidgeting is simply the difference between the 2 speeds becoming audible. By day 4 or 5, most people report the same small thing. The prayer starts arriving somewhere, not dramatically. You get to that line and something in your chest registers it. Briefly, the way you register a name you haven't heard in years. That's the whole experience. It's undramatic. I told you at the start it would be smaller than a cure. What you should not expect? Money. An opportunity landing in your inbox because you prayed. A resolution to the thing that's actually frightening you. If any of those arrive during your 7 days, they arrived for their own reasons, and attributing them to this practice would be the exact error I've spent half an hour trying to avoid. What you might notice instead is stranger and easier to miss. You may notice something you'd been walking past. I want to be careful here, so let me put the honest version first. Half of the people who watched a video and were asked to count basketball passes did not see a person in a gorilla suit walk directly through the middle of the frame. Half. Not glance away, look straight at it, and not see it. That's not a failure of eyesight. It's what focused attention costs. When your attention is clamped onto one task, unexpected things in plain view stop registering at all. Now hold that next to a month where you're frightened about money, and ask yourself what your attention has been clamped onto. We've arrived at the part where I have to be most careful, so I'm going to say the hard thing without dressing it. If you are in genuine financial crisis, if the rent is not going to be paid, if the debt is compounding faster than you can service it, if you are choosing between food and medicine, you need a plan, and you probably need a professional, a financial counselor, a creditor negotiation, your union, your community, your family. And if what you're carrying is closer to despair than to worry, you need a doctor or a crisis line. And you need them today, not this instead. This alongside, or this afterward, or not at all. Any practice that positions itself as a replacement for action, judgment, or help is not a spiritual practice. It's an anesthetic. Good. That said, now here's why the practice still matters. And it's the opposite of what you'd expect. The problem with financial fear is not only that it's unpleasant, it's that it degrades the equipment you need to get out of it. When researchers gave people problems to solve after prompting them to think about a difficult financial situation, participants who were poor performed measurably worse, while the same prompt did nothing to the well-off. Then they went and tested sugarcane farmers across their own income cycle, the same individuals twice. Once before harvest, when money was scarce, and once after, when it wasn't. The same farmer scored worse when he was poor. Not a different farmer. The same one. Scarcity was consuming the cognitive bandwidth he needed for everything else. That is the trap, stated precisely. Being short of money makes you worse at the exact thinking required to stop being short of money. Fear narrows you at the moment you most need to be wide. And this is where the other half of the research points somewhere useful. Attention isn't a fixed aperture. It opens and closes with emotional state, and that has been measured directly. People shown films that produced amusement or contentment performed differently on a visual task than people in a neutral state their attention took in the broader pattern, rather than clamping onto the detail. Negative states did the reverse. They narrowed the range of actions people could even imagine taking. Put those two findings beside each other and you have the entire argument of this video, without a single theological claim in it. Fear narrows the aperture. Settled states widen it. And the difference between the two is not what you believe. It's your breathing, your posture, and what your mind is doing in the last 2 minutes before sleep. So no, the prayer does not produce bread. What the prayer does, said slowly, with the hand open, from gratitude rather than from bracing, is move you out of the state where you cannot see the bread that's already in the room. You didn't receive anything. You stopped bracing and the aperture opened. That's a smaller claim than the one being sold to you. It's also the only one I can defend. And it happens to be the one that's actually useful, because the opportunity you didn't take last year was probably not withheld from you. You were counting passes. Day 8. The 7 days are over, and this either stays in your bedroom or it doesn't. Here's how it moves outward. 5 places, in order, each one harder than the last. 1. Before you open the bill. Not after. Before. Hand open, 1 line, 2 seconds. Then open the envelope. You are choosing the state you meet the number in. 2. Before you ask anyone for anything. The email requesting the raise. The message asking for the extension. The call to the person who might hire you. People can hear bracing and writing it comes through as either apology or aggression. And both cost you. Send it from the open hand. 3. At a meal, with other people, silently. Hand open under the table. Nobody sees it, nobody has to be told. This is the first one where you're doing it in company, and you'll be surprised how much harder that makes it. 4. Before the room where you're outnumbered, the negotiation, the interview, the conversation you've been dreading. 90 seconds in the car. This one requires all 3 earlier stages under pressure, which is why it's 4th and not 1st. 5. Say the line for someone who isn't you. Look at the pronoun. It was never give me. It's give us in every version. In every one of those 3 quarreling traditions. That is not an accident of style. So on day 8, put a specific face in that word. Someone whose situation is worse than yours and whose name you know. There's a reason this one is last. And it isn't only difficulty. In the gratitude studies, the people keeping a daily record of what they were thankful for didn't just report feeling better, they were more likely to have helped someone else with a problem or offered support to another person. The widened aperture doesn't stop at your own life. That's 5. There is no 6th. If you find yourself adding 1, you've started collecting practices instead of doing this one. Open your hand one more time. Same gesture as the beginning. Palm up, resting on your knee. Nothing has changed about it, except that you now know 3 things you didn't know then. You know it's the oldest part of the prayer, older than the Greek, older than the invented word, older than the argument about what bread means. It was there in the marketplace before dawn, in every hand that had to be opened by evening or go hungry. You know it's the one part of this your body can't fake, and you know what it actually does. Not summon, not persuade. It makes gripping physically unavailable for as long as you hold it, and in that window your breathing settles, and your attention opens, and you become briefly, measurably someone capable of seeing what is actually in front of you. That's all I have. Twice a day, 7 days, 90 seconds each. The last 2 minutes before sleep and the first 2 after. Keep every doubt you walked in with. They're not in the way. And if in a week you notice something you'd been walking past a person, an option, a door that had been standing open the whole time, don't call it provision. You didn't get richer. You got your hands open.